The spotlight was so bright I could barely see the audience. But I didn't need to. I only needed to see the front row. Michael sat perfectly still, his hands resting on his knees. His face had turned so pale that, for a second, I wondered if he was about to pass out. His mother, Linda, stared at me with her mouth hanging open. Jason, Michael's coworker, the one who had unknowingly started this entire chain of events, wasn't even looking at me anymore. He was staring directly at Michael. The theater erupted into applause. I thanked the organizers, said how proud our company was to support the arts in Chicago, handed the microphone back to the host, and walked off the stage. 7 steps. Exactly 7 steps from the spotlight back to the first row. A week earlier, I had absolutely no idea any of this would happen. It started on a Friday evening. Michael's architecture firm was holding its annual holiday celebration at one of the nicest restaurants downtown, overlooking the Chicago River. I came straight from work. Actually, straight from work wasn't entirely true. I had changed clothes in the parking garage because I didn't have time to go home first. At 3 o'clock that afternoon my phone rang. It was our vice president from the corporate office in New York. Emily, he said. I wanted to congratulate you personally. Your Midwest division just finished #1 in annual growth. I smiled. Thank you. No, he replied. Thank you. This happened because of your leadership. I thanked him, ended the call, and had exactly 45 minutes before another executive meeting. By the time I finally arrived at the restaurant, my brain was still full of sales reports, quarterly projections, and hiring plans. The restaurant buzzed with laughter. Crystal glasses clinked together. Jazz music floated softly through the room. Michael looked genuinely happy to see me. There she is, he smiled. He kissed my cheek and introduced me to several of his coworkers. I smiled politely, asked questions, laughed at appropriate moments. I'd attended enough corporate dinners to know the routine. People talked about clients, projects, construction permits, office politics. Nothing unusual. Then Jason walked over. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a navy blue suit that probably cost more than my first car. He held a glass of Cabernet and smiled warmly. At first I thought he was simply being friendly. Then he looked at me with an expression I couldn't identify immediately. It took me several seconds. Pity. Not cruel pity. The comfortable kind. The kind people reserve for someone they think has never accomplished much in life. You've got it easy, he chuckled. I'm sorry. You stay home while Michael does all the hard work. He laughed. I honestly envy you. I blinked. I'm not sure I understand. Jason looked confused. Oh. He scratched the back of his neck. I figured Michael told you. Told me what? He shrugged casually. That you're a homemaker. I didn't say anything. My wife stays home too, he continued. Nothing wrong with it. Honestly, if I earned enough, I'd tell her never to work another day. He raised his glass. Michael's one of the good ones. I kept staring at him. He takes care of his family. Another smile. Guys like him are rare nowadays. He genuinely believed every word he was saying. He thought he was complimenting both of us. I forced a smile because I honestly had no idea what else to do. Then I quietly excused myself and walked toward the windows overlooking the river. Outside, Chicago glittered beneath thousands of lights. Tour boats drifted slowly across the dark water. Traffic crawled over the bridges. People hurried through the cold evening wrapped in heavy coats. I barely noticed any of it. One thought echoed over and over inside my head. Just 4 hours earlier, the executive team had congratulated me for leading the fastest growing region in the company. Now my husband's coworker sincerely believed I had never had a career at all. A few minutes later Michael joined me. Everything okay? Yeah. You've been hiding over here. I talked to Jason. Michael smiled. Oh, Jason's a good guy. Talks a little too much after a couple drinks, but he's harmless. Yeah, I answered quietly. He talks a lot. Michael looked at me for maybe 1 second. Then someone across the room waved him over. Be right back. And just like that, he walked away. I watched him disappear into another conversation. Something inside me felt strangely cold. Not angry. Not hurt. Just cold. Because deep down, I already knew Jason hadn't invented that story on his own. Someone had told him. And there was only one person who could have done that. The drive home was quiet. Michael hummed along to the music playing softly through the speakers, completely unaware of the storm building beside him. Downtown Chicago disappeared behind us as we merged onto Lakeshore Drive. The skyline reflected across Lake Michigan, glowing against the night sky. Normally, I loved that view. That night, I barely noticed it. Michael talked about one of his projects. Something about a difficult client who couldn't decide between two building designs. I nodded at the right moments. I don't think I heard a single sentence. By the time we pulled into our driveway in Lincoln Park, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this go. Inside the house, Michael loosened his tie, kicked off his shoes, poured himself a glass of sparkling water, and collapsed onto the couch. He looked completely relaxed, like it had been an ordinary evening. I stood in the kitchen for a minute, watching him scroll through his phone. Then I walked into the living room. Michael. He looked up. Yeah. I want to ask you something. Sure. What exactly do you tell people about me? He frowned. What do you mean? Jason told me tonight that I'm a stay-at-home wife. Michael didn't answer. He also believes I don't have a career. Silence. He thinks you support me financially. Michael sighed. Not the sigh of someone caught lying. The sigh of someone annoyed that an uncomfortable subject had appeared. Emily. No. I folded my arms. I'd like an actual answer. He rubbed his forehead. It's not exactly like that. Then explain it. Another pause. Finally he set his phone down. I just don't get into details. I stared at him. What details? You know. No, Michael. I don't. He looked away. I don't tell people how much you make. I didn't ask about my salary. I just don't think it's anyone else's business. I took one step closer. You told them I don't work. I never actually said that. Jason seems pretty confident. Michael sighed again. I just never corrected anyone. So they assumed? He hesitated. Something like that. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You let everyone think your wife sits at home all day? It's easier. Easier for who? He stood up and began pacing across the living room. For me. There it was. Finally. For you. He stopped near the fireplace. You don't understand how guys talk. Try me. You really want to know? Yes. He crossed his arms. If people found out that my wife makes more money than I do. He didn't finish. I waited. They'd never let it go. I said nothing. You know how construction firms are. No. I don't. They'd joke about it every single day. So, you think that's funny? No. But lying isn't exactly better. It's not lying. I laughed. The sound surprised even me. You told people your wife doesn't have a career. I never said it like that. You let them believe it. He looked frustrated now. Emily, you've got 2 master's degrees. You manage over 100 employees. You travel across the Midwest every month. You negotiate contracts worth millions of dollars. And somehow, I looked him straight in the eyes. You decided it would be better if everyone thought I stayed home folding laundry. His jaw tightened. You don't get it. Then help me. He took a deep breath. I wanted people to respect me. The room went completely silent. They do respect you. Not if they know. Know what? That my wife is more successful than I am. His voice cracked ever so slightly. I've worked my whole life to build a reputation. I didn't want to become the guy whose wife outranks him. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Not because I was angry. Because I was trying to understand how the man I'd been married to for 7 years could be so terrified of the truth. Finally I asked one simple question. So what's your plan? He looked confused. My plan? Were you going to keep telling this story forever? He shrugged. It never seemed important. I stared at him. It wasn't important? 7 years of marriage. 7 years of promotions. Late nights. Business trips. Weekend conference calls. Countless sacrifices. Reduced to, my wife doesn't work. Michael stepped closer. Emily. Please. It's just something I tell the guys. It doesn't affect you. I looked at him for a long time. Then I nodded once. Okay. Relief immediately spread across his face. Really? Really? You understand? I understand. He smiled. Walked back to the couch. Picked up his phone. Within 2 minutes he was laughing at something on the screen. The conversation was over. At least, that's what he believed. I walked upstairs, changed into comfortable clothes, and stood by the bedroom window. Snow had started falling over Chicago. The streets were almost empty. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry anymore. Instead, an idea quietly began taking shape. Not out of revenge. Not out of spite. But because for the first time I realized something important. Michael wasn't protecting our privacy. He was protecting a lie. And eventually, every lie asks for the same thing. A stage. And an audience. Monday morning arrived like every other Monday. By 8:30, I was already in our Chicago office, coffee in one hand and my laptop open before I even took off my coat. The week ahead was packed. A leadership meeting. 2 interviews. A budget review. And starting Wednesday, a 3-day business trip to Minneapolis to finalize a distribution agreement we'd been negotiating for almost 6 months. There wasn't much time to think about Friday night. At least, that's what I told myself. But every now and then, I'd remember Jason raising his wine glass. Michael's one of the good ones. I'd remember the pity in his eyes. And I'd wonder how many other people believed exactly the same story. Wednesday morning, I boarded the first flight out of O'Hare. By noon, I was sitting across from executives who were deciding whether to trust our company with a contract worth several $million. The negotiations lasted nearly 6 hours. There were disagreements, counteroffers, long breaks, more coffee than I care to admit. When we finally shook hands, everyone around the table smiled. "We're excited to work with you," one of the executives said. "So are we." My assistant texted before I even reached the elevator. "Congratulations." The team heard the news. I smiled. It had been a good day. By Thursday afternoon, we had finalized every detail. Friday evening I landed back in Chicago exhausted. Michael picked me up from the airport. "How'd it go?" "We signed." He grinned. "I knew you would." For a moment, everything felt normal again. We ordered takeout on the way home. Thai food. My favorite. We spent dinner talking about ordinary things. The neighbor's dog had gotten loose again. Our dishwasher was making a strange noise. His office was behind schedule on another project. Nothing serious. Nothing emotional. Then, as he carried our empty plates into the kitchen, he spoke almost casually. "Oh, I almost forgot." I looked up. "Forgot what?" "Our neighbor stopped by yesterday." "Which one?" "Brian. The guy across the street." "What about him?" Michael rinsed a plate under the faucet. "He said his cousin's warehouse is hiring." I waited. "They're looking for someone to package orders." He smiled. I told him thanks, but we were doing fine. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misunderstood him. "What?" He turned around. "What? You told Brian I needed a warehouse job?" He shrugged. He was just trying to help. "Help with what?" "You know." "No. I don't know." Michael looked genuinely confused by my reaction. "I wasn't going to explain your work schedule." So instead, I spoke very quietly. "You let him believe I was unemployed. It wasn't a big deal." I stared at him. I'd been in Minneapolis for 3 days. "I know. Representing my company." "I know." "So what exactly did you think he believed I was doing?" Michael sighed. "Emily, it was easier." That sentence again. Always easier. For him. I stood up from the table. Walked over to the kitchen window. Outside, snowflakes drifted beneath the streetlights. Families walked their dogs. Cars rolled slowly past our house. An ordinary suburban evening. Behind me, Michael continued loading the dishwasher as if nothing significant had happened. I suddenly remembered something else. His mother. Every time she visited, she'd ask me the same question. "So, what have you been keeping busy with?" Not "how's work?" Not "how was your trip?" Not "how's the company?" Always, "keeping busy." As if she already knew the answer. As if everyone did. Because someone had made sure they all believed the same version of my life. I wasn't furious anymore. The feeling had evolved into something colder. Clearer. Like looking at numbers on a spreadsheet. Everything suddenly added up. The restaurant. Jason. Brian. His family. His coworkers. Maybe even our friends. One lie had quietly grown into an entire fictional life. And Michael had been maintaining it for years. The next afternoon, while eating lunch at my desk, I opened our extended family group chat. There were 16 people in it. Parents. Siblings. Cousins. Aunts. Uncles. The chat mostly consisted of birthday wishes, holiday photos, and terrible jokes forwarded by Michael's uncle. I typed a message. Then deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that one too. Finally, I smiled. I knew exactly what to write. "Hi everyone. I entered a giveaway a few weeks ago, and somehow won 20 front row tickets to a private charity gala and concert next Saturday at the Chicago Theater. I can't possibly use them all, so if anyone wants to come let me know. First come, first served. I hit send. The replies started almost immediately. Linda was first. Emily. That's incredible. Your father-in-law and I would absolutely love to go. Michael's younger sister replied next. Count us in. His Uncle Robert added 3 clapping emojis. Then came Michael's private text. Michael, seriously? Front row? That's amazing. A second message appeared almost instantly. Mind if I invite a couple people from work? Jason would love this. I looked at the screen for several seconds. Then I smiled. Of course. The more the merrier. A thumbs up emoji appeared. Then a laughing face. Then, you're the best. I locked my phone and returned to my presentation. The plan was no longer just an idea. It had become real. The only thing left was waiting for Saturday. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. Chicago was wrapped in one of those crisp winter evenings where the air feels sharp enough to wake you up the second you step outside. By 6:30, the lights of the Chicago theater lit up State Street like something from an old movie. People in evening dresses and tailored suits streamed toward the entrance, laughing, taking photos, enjoying the night. I parked in the reserved garage behind the theater. One of the perks of being a corporate sponsor. I checked my phone. 3 unread messages. Linda, we're here. Where are you? Jason. Emily, thank you again. My wife has wanted to come here forever. Michael. Everyone keeps talking about how lucky we got. Seriously, you're amazing. I smiled to myself. Lucky. That word again. When I walked around to the front entrance, everyone was already gathered together. Linda immediately wrapped me in a hug. Oh, Emily. You always have the best luck. She looked around at the elegant crowd. I can't believe you actually won these. I smiled politely. I guess I got lucky. She squeezed my arm. See, good things happen to good people. Michael's Uncle Robert laughed. You'd better keep entering those giveaways. Everyone chuckled. Michael walked over and kissed my cheek. I still can't believe these seats. Front row. People pay a fortune for events like this. I know. He slipped his arm around my waist. I'm really proud of you. For a split second, I almost laughed. Proud. Because I'd supposedly clicked the right button on social media. Not because I'd spent 15 years building a career. Not because my company was one of the evening's principal sponsors. Just lucky. Jason arrived a few minutes later with his wife, Megan. He looked much more polished than he had at the restaurant. Completely sober. Emily. He shook my hand enthusiastically. I owe you one. Megan smiled. I've wanted to come to one of these galas for years. I'm glad you could make it. Jason looked around the lobby. I checked online. These tickets were selling for over $2,000 each. He whistled. That's one incredible giveaway. I guess someone upstairs likes you. He laughed. Then he added, almost without thinking. I mean, when you're home all day, you've got time to keep track of contests like that. Megan gently nudged his elbow. Jason. What? He looked confused. I'm giving her a compliment. I smiled. It's okay. He relaxed immediately. Exactly. I told Michael last week. He grinned. Your wife has life figured out. Everyone laughed. Everyone except me. Michael laughed too. Not loudly. Just enough to blend in. Not enough to stop it. Not enough to correct him. Again. An usher escorted us inside. The theater was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead. The walls were lined with gold detailing and deep red velvet. A string quartet played softly as guests found their seats. Our entire group sat in the very first row. Exactly where I had planned. Linda couldn't stop looking around. I've never sat this close before. Neither had Uncle Robert. Or Jason. Or Michael. This is unbelievable, Michael whispered. He squeezed my hand. Thank you. I smiled back. You're welcome. The evening began with a performance by the Chicago Symphony's Chamber Ensemble. Then came a Broadway vocalist. Then a jazz trio. The audience loved every minute of it. So did our group. Michael laughed. Clapped enthusiastically. Even sang along during one familiar song. Watching him, you would have thought this was simply the perfect date night. At intermission, he returned carrying 2 bottles of sparkling water. This has been incredible. He handed me one. You really outdid yourself. I tried. He smiled. You always know how to make things special. Again. He had no idea. No idea that every minute was bringing us closer to something he never saw coming. The second half of the evening began. The performances continued. But I found it difficult to focus on the stage. Instead, I kept thinking. I could still stop this. I could stand up, walk out, pretend I wasn't feeling well. Nobody would ever know. Michael would go home happy. His family would continue believing whatever he told them. Jason would never question the story. Everything could stay exactly the way it had been for the last 7 years. I honestly considered it. For maybe 3 seconds. Then the lights shifted. The music faded. A man in a tuxedo stepped onto the stage holding a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen. He smiled at the audience. Before our final performance, we'd like to recognize the organizations whose generosity made tonight's event possible. Applause filled the theater. The host continued. We're grateful to every sponsor who believes in supporting the arts here in Chicago. My heartbeat slowed. Not faster. Slower. Almost peaceful. I knew exactly what came next. The host glanced toward the wings. And now, we'd like to invite one of our lead corporate partners to the stage. He looked down at the card in his hand. Our regional vice president for the Midwest. He spoke my name. Emily Carter. Silence. Just one heartbeat. Then, I stood up. For a moment, I could feel every pair of eyes in the theater turning toward me. Michael didn't move. At first, I don't think he even realized what he'd heard. Then I felt his hand slowly slide away from mine. I stood, smoothed the front of my black dress, and took my first step toward the stage. 7 steps. I counted every one of them. 1, 2, 3. By the 4th step, I heard someone behind me whisper, "Wait, Emily." By the 5th, Linda let out a quiet gasp. By the 6th, Jason had stopped clapping. By the 7th, I climbed the stairs. The host greeted me with a warm smile and extended his hand. "Thank you for joining us." "My pleasure." He handed me the microphone while photographers moved into position. Camera flashes lit up the theater. I glanced toward the front row. Michael looked as though someone had drained every drop of color from his face. Linda stared at me in complete disbelief. Her eyes bounced from me to the giant screen above the stage. Because behind me, my name had appeared in letters nearly 6 feet tall. Emily Carter, Regional Vice President, Midwest Division. Harrison Consumer Group. The company logo filled the screen. Beneath it, another line appeared. Let's sponsor. The applause grew even louder. I saw Jason read the screen once. Then read it again. His eyebrows slowly lifted. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at Michael. Trying to understand. Trying to connect 2 completely different versions of reality. I smiled into the microphone. Good evening, everyone. The audience quieted. On behalf of Harrison Consumer Group, I'd like to thank the Chicago Arts Foundation for everything they do to keep music and culture accessible in our city. I paused. It has been an honor to support tonight's event. Another round of applause. I hope you've enjoyed the evening as much as I have. Thank you. That was it. 25 seconds. Maybe 30. No dramatic speech. No accusations. No hidden message. Just the truth. The host shook my hand once more. Thank you, Emily. My pleasure. I handed back the microphone and stepped off the stage. Again. 7 steps. Back toward the front row. As I approached our seats, I noticed something immediately. Michael wasn't there. His chair was empty. I stopped for half a second. Looked toward the aisle. Just in time to see him disappearing through the exit doors. Walking fast. Head down. Not once did he look back. I quietly sat down. Linda was frozen. Jason hadn't blinked in what felt like a full minute. His wife leaned over and whispered something in his ear. He didn't answer. The orchestra began the final performance. The audience applauded. Life moved on. As if nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside our little group, everything had changed. The concert ended almost an hour later. People slowly poured into the grand lobby. Some stopped for photographs. Others collected their coats. Conversations echoed beneath the enormous chandeliers. Our family gathered near one of the marble columns. Everyone was strangely quiet. Michael still hadn't returned. Finally, Linda walked over to me. Emily. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. What was that? I smiled gently. What do you mean? The stage. The announcement. You. She looked completely lost. You work for that company? Ido. For how long? Almost 8 years. Her eyes widened. 8. She couldn't finish the sentence. You've been an executive? I nodded. I started as a regional director. Last year I was promoted to regional vice president. I oversee operations across 5 Midwestern states. Silence. No one spoke. Not even Uncle Robert. Jason finally cleared his throat. Emily. He looked genuinely embarrassed. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. No. I really do. I had no idea. I know. I believed. He looked down at the floor. What I was told. I understand. His voice grew quieter. I feel like an idiot. I offered him a small smile. You weren't the one who lied. He closed his eyes for a brief second. Everything suddenly made sense to him. The business trips. The late meetings. The confidence. Even the reserved parking garage behind the theater. None of it had been luck. None of it had been a giveaway. Then his eyes widened again. The tickets. I nodded. They weren't prizes. Everyone looked at me. My company receives sponsor allocations every year. I was given 20 tickets. I simply invited everyone. Another long silence. Linda slowly sat down on one of the lobby benches. She looked like someone trying to remember the last 7 years all over again. Finally, almost to herself, she whispered, 7 years. I nodded. Yes. 7 years. No one had another question. Because there was only one question left. Where was Michael? I found Michael exactly where I expected. Outside. Standing alone beneath one of the old streetlights across from the theater. Snow drifted slowly through the cold Chicago air. Cars rolled past on State Street. People walked by without giving him a second glance. To them, he was just another man waiting outside after a concert. To me, he looked like someone whose carefully built world had collapsed in less than 30 seconds. He heard the theater doors open behind him. Without turning around, he said quietly, So, you finally got what you wanted. I stepped beside him. I wasn't trying to get anything. He laughed. A bitter, humorless laugh. Really? You embarrass me in front of everyone. I looked at him. No. I told the truth. He finally turned. His eyes were red, not from crying, but from anger. My mother was there. I know. My coworkers. I know. Jason. I know. They all know now. Yes. They know the truth. His jaw tightened. You could have handled this privately. I couldn't help but stare at him. Privately. I tried. His expression changed. Only slightly. You remember last Friday? I asked. When I asked what you were telling people? He looked away. I remember. I asked you to explain. You did. I gave you every chance. He rubbed both hands over his face. I didn't think. No. You didn't. For several seconds neither of us spoke. The wind carried faint music from inside the theater. People laughed as they walked past. Some recognized me from the stage. A few smiled politely. One older couple thanked me for supporting the event. I thanked them back. Michael watched the entire exchange. Only after they walked away did he speak again. Does everyone at your company know about me? The question surprised me. What? Do they know I make less than you? I blinked. No. Why would they? I don't talk about our finances. He stared at me. I've never had a reason to. The irony hung between us. Heavy. Painfully obvious. He shook his head. You don't understand. Help me understand. You've never worked in my industry. No. But I know what respect looks like. He sighed. It isn't that simple. It never is. He looked out toward the traffic. When guys sit around after work, they joke. They compare salaries. They compare houses, cars, vacations, everything. And if they found out, he stopped, they'd think I couldn't provide. I answered quietly. But you never were. He closed his eyes. That sentence landed harder than I intended. Not because it was cruel. Because it was true. We both paid the mortgage. We both bought this house. We both built our lives. You weren't carrying me. We were carrying each other. He said nothing. I continued. But somewhere along the way, you decided your pride mattered more than my identity. His shoulders dropped. I never wanted to hurt you. I know. And that's the saddest part. He looked confused. You weren't trying to hurt me. You just never stopped to think what it felt like to disappear. I disappeared from every conversation. Every introduction. Every family gathering. Every neighbor who asked what I did. You erased me. I became. I searched for the right words. Someone's wife. Nothing more. He looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he whispered. I was scared. There it was. Not arrogance. Not cruelty. Fear. I know. I kept telling myself it was temporary. I thought maybe one day I'd get promoted. Earn more. Catch up. And then I'd tell everyone. I nodded slowly. But every year it became harder. Exactly. So you told another lie. He nodded. And another. Another nod. And eventually, you had to keep protecting all of them. His eyes filled with regret. I never imagined it would get this far. It got this far because every time someone believed the lie, you felt relieved. He didn't deny it. After another long silence, he quietly asked, "What happens now?" I looked at the snow collecting on the sidewalk. "I don't know. Can we fix this?" I turned toward him. "Michael. This wasn't one mistake. This wasn't one conversation. This was 7 years." He swallowed hard. "I know. You let your family believe I had no career. You let your friends believe I depended on you. You let complete strangers pity me. And every single time, you stayed silent." His voice cracked. "I can change." I believed him. I truly did. The problem wasn't whether he could change now. The problem was that I no longer recognized the man standing in front of me, because the person I thought I'd married would have been proud to introduce me exactly as I was, not invent someone easier for the world to admire. I looked him in the eyes. For the first time that evening, I felt absolutely certain about what I was going to say next. I took a slow breath. The city around us kept moving as if nothing had happened. Traffic lights changed. A train rumbled somewhere in the distance. People laughed as they climbed into waiting Ubers. Life went on. Finally, I looked at Michael. "I want a divorce." For a second he didn't react. Almost as if his brain refused to process the words. Then he blinked. "What?" "I want a divorce." "No." He shook his head immediately. "No, Emily. You're angry." "I'm not." "You don't mean that." "Ido." He stepped closer. "Please. Let's just go home. We'll talk tomorrow." I've already tried talking. I've tried asking. I've tried understanding. I've tried waiting. And every time, you asked me to protect your version of reality. He rubbed both hands through his hair. "I'll tell everyone. Tomorrow. I swear. I'll call Jason. I'll tell my mom. I'll explain everything." I looked at him quietly. "You still don't understand." His face tightened. "What do you mean?" "This isn't about telling people now. It's about the fact that you never wanted them to know in the first place." He looked away. I was ashamed. "No." I answered softly. "You were ashamed of me." His head snapped toward me. "That's not true." "Then why did you hide me?" "I wasn't hiding you. You erased me." "There's a difference." His shoulders slumped. "I loved you." "I believe you. I still do." That surprised him. "You do?" "Yes. I think you loved me. But I also think you loved the version of yourself you created for everyone else. And eventually, that version became more important than I was." He closed his eyes. The silence between us stretched longer than either of us wanted. Finally he whispered, "We were happy." I thought about that. Really thought about it. Not for his sake. For mine. Had we been happy? We laughed together. We traveled. We celebrated birthdays. Cooked dinner on Sunday nights. Watched movies on the couch. Visited his parents for Thanksgiving. On the surface, yes. We looked happy. Then I realized something. You were happy. He frowned. "What? You said we." "But that's not true. You were happy. I was invisible." He stared at me without saying a word. "You got to keep your reputation. You got to be admired. You got to feel respected." And I smiled politely while people congratulated you for supporting a wife who didn't exist. A tear rolled down his cheek. He wiped it away immediately. "I never realized." "I know. And that's why I can't do this anymore." He reached for my hand. Instinctively. The same way he had 1,000 times before. I looked down at his fingers. Then gently stepped back. He let his hand fall. "I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything. I'll quit my job if that's what it takes. I don't care about the job. I cared about honesty. And I don't know how to rebuild 7 years of broken trust." His breathing became uneven. "I don't want to lose you. I think." I paused. "You already did." Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Snow had begun collecting on the shoulders of his coat. Mine too. Finally, he asked the question I think he'd been avoiding all night. When did you decide? I answered honestly. Not tonight. Not when I walked on stage. Not when Jason apologized. He looked at me. When then? The night you told me. It doesn't affect you. He lowered his head. That's when I realized. You truly believed my identity was optional. And once someone believes that, there isn't much left to save. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. My rideshare had arrived. The driver rolled down the window. Emily. That's me. I picked up my purse. Michael looked desperate. Please. Just don't leave like this. I met his eyes one last time. I'm not leaving because of tonight. I'm leaving because tonight finally showed everyone else the truth I've been living with for years. I opened the car door. Before getting inside, I turned back. I genuinely hope you find peace, Michael. I really do. But I can't spend the rest of my life pretending to be smaller. Just so someone else can feel bigger. Then I got into the car. As we pulled away from the curb, I looked back once through the rear window. Michael was still standing beneath the streetlight. Alone. Getting smaller and smaller as the distance between us grew. Eventually, he disappeared into the falling snow. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. I took a slow breath. The city around us kept moving as if nothing had happened. Traffic lights changed. A train rumbled somewhere in the distance. People laughed as they climbed into waiting Ubers. Life went on. Finally, I looked at Michael. I want a divorce. For a second, he didn't react. Almost as if his brain refused to process the words. Then he blinked. What? I want a divorce. No. He shook his head immediately. No, Emily. You're angry. I'm not. You don't mean that. Ido. He stepped closer. Please. Let's just go home. We'll talk tomorrow. I've already tried talking. I've tried asking. I've tried understanding. I've tried waiting. And every time, you asked me to protect your version of reality. He rubbed both hands through his hair. I'll tell everyone. Tomorrow. I swear. I'll call Jason. I'll tell my mom. I'll explain everything. I looked at him quietly. You still don't understand. His face tightened. What do you mean? This isn't about telling people now. It's about the fact that you never wanted them to know in the first place. He looked away. I was ashamed. No. I answered softly. You were ashamed of me. His head snapped toward me. That's not true. Then why did you hide me? I wasn't hiding you. You erased me. There's a difference. His shoulders slumped. I loved you. I believe you. I still do. That surprised him. You do. Yes. I think you loved me. But I also think you loved the version of yourself you created for everyone else. And eventually, that version became more important than I was. He closed his eyes. The silence between us stretched longer than either of us wanted. Finally he whispered. We were happy. I thought about that. Really thought about it. Not for his sake. For mine. Had we been happy? We laughed together. We traveled. We celebrated birthdays. Cooked dinner on Sunday nights. Watched movies on the couch. Visited his parents for Thanksgiving. On the surface. Yes. We looked happy. Then I realized something. You were happy. He frowned. What? You said we. But that's not true. You were happy. I was invisible. He stared at me without saying a word. You got to keep your reputation. You got to be admired. You got to feel respected. And I smiled politely while people congratulated you for supporting a wife who didn't exist. A tear rolled down his cheek. He wiped it away immediately. I never realized. I know. And that's why I can't do this anymore. He reached for my hand. Instinctively. The same way he had 1,000 times before. I looked down at his fingers. Then gently stepped back. He let his hand fall. I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything. I'll quit my job if that's what it takes. I don't care about the job. I cared about honesty. And I don't know how to rebuild 7 years of broken trust. His breathing became uneven. I don't want to lose you. I think. I paused. You already did. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Snow had begun collecting on the shoulders of his coat. Mine too. Finally he asked the question I think he'd been avoiding all night. When did you decide? I answered honestly. Not tonight. Not when I walked on stage. Not when Jason apologized. He looked at me. When then? The night you told me. It doesn't affect you. He lowered his head. That's when I realized. You truly believed my identity was optional. And once someone believes that, there isn't much left to save. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. My rideshare had arrived. The driver rolled down the window. Emily. That's me. I picked up my purse. Michael looked desperate. Please. Just don't leave like this. I met his eyes one last time. I'm not leaving because of tonight. I'm leaving because tonight finally showed everyone else the truth I've been living with for years. I opened the car door. Before getting inside, I turned back. I genuinely hope you find peace, Michael. I really do. But I can't spend the rest of my life pretending to be smaller. Just so someone else can feel bigger. Then I got into the car. As we pulled away from the curb, I looked back once through the rear window. Michael was still standing beneath the streetlight. Alone. Getting smaller and smaller as the distance between us grew. Eventually, he disappeared into the falling snow. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. The divorce was finalized just under 3 months later. It took less than 20 minutes. The judge reviewed the paperwork, asked us both a few routine questions, confirmed that all financial matters had already been settled, and signed the order. Just like that. 7 years of marriage officially came to an end. No raised voices. No dramatic speeches. No courtroom. Just signatures. Paperwork. And silence. The house had always belonged to me. I bought it 2 years before Michael and I met. So there were no arguments about where either of us would live. He packed his things over the course of a weekend. Books. Clothes. His drafting equipment. A collection of baseball caps he'd gathered over the years. It was strange how a person's entire life could fit into a rented moving truck. I stayed upstairs while he packed. Not because I hated him. Because I knew watching would only make it harder for both of us. Every now and then I heard a drawer close. A box being taped shut. The front door opening and closing. The ordinary sounds of a life being dismantled. Late Sunday afternoon he knocked gently on the bedroom door. Emily. Yeah. I'm almost done. I know. There was a pause. I just wanted to say goodbye. I walked downstairs. The living room looked unfamiliar. Half the bookshelves were empty. His favorite chair was gone. The walls somehow seemed larger. Michael stood beside the front door with his car keys in his hand. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that settles somewhere much deeper. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. I know. I've replayed everything 1,000 times. I believe you. If I could go back. He stopped himself. I would tell everyone the truth. I smiled sadly. I think you would. And I would have been proud. His voice cracked. Proud of you. I know. For a few seconds neither of us moved. Then he asked quietly, Can I tell you one thing? Of course. I never lied because I thought you weren't enough. He looked directly into my eyes. I lied because I thought I wasn't. Those words stayed with me. Because for the first time, I believed I was hearing the real Michael. Not the one trying to impress coworkers. Not the one protecting his image. Just the frightened man underneath all of it. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know. I truly am. I know. He nodded once. Picked up the last box. Opened the front door. Before stepping outside, he looked back one final time. I hope you're happy. I answered honestly. I hope one day you are too. He gave a small nod. Then he walked away. I stood at the window as the moving truck disappeared around the corner. The house became unbelievably quiet. No television. No footsteps upstairs. No coffee brewing in the kitchen before sunrise. Just silence. At first it felt lonely. Then little by little, it started to feel peaceful. The following Monday, life moved forward. At 9 o'clock sharp, I joined our executive leadership meeting. Quarterly numbers. Expansion plans. Hiring forecasts. Exactly the kind of conversations that had filled my calendar for years. No one at work treated me differently. They hadn't before. They didn't now. After the meeting, my assistant stopped by my office. Congratulations. I looked up. For what? She smiled. The Chicago Arts Foundation called. They're hosting another fundraising gala this fall. And they specifically asked if you'd be willing to represent the company again. I laughed. Already. They said guests loved your speech. My speech lasted 30 seconds. She grinned. Apparently it made an impression. I looked out the window toward the Chicago skyline. Funny. The shortest speech I'd ever given. Had changed my life more than any presentation I'd spent weeks preparing. A few weeks later, I was walking through Millennium Park during my lunch break when someone called my name. Emily. I turned around. It was Jason. He looked slightly embarrassed. Hey. Hey. He held a coffee in one hand and smiled awkwardly. I wasn't sure if I should say hello. Why not? I figured you probably hated me. I shook my head. I never hated you. He looked relieved. I've thought about that night a lot. So have I. He laughed quietly. I've started paying attention at work. To what? The things people say. He shrugged. It's amazing how often we assume we know someone's life. I smiled. Most of the time. We don't. He nodded. I've stopped making jokes about people's wives. That's probably a good start. We both laughed. Before leaving, he hesitated. You know. Actually admire what you did. I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? You didn't humiliate Michael. You simply stopped hiding. I thought about that after he walked away. Because maybe. He was right. I had never exposed Michael. I had only introduced the real version of myself. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything. It's been almost a year now. People often ask if I regret what happened. It's an interesting question. Because it assumes everything changed on the night I walked onto that stage. It didn't. That night simply revealed what had already been true for a long time. The marriage didn't end because I accepted a microphone. It ended because somewhere along the way, honesty stopped being welcome in our home. Life has a funny way of settling into a new rhythm. The first few months after the divorce felt unfamiliar. There were quiet mornings without anyone rushing through the kitchen. No debates over what movie to watch. No weekend trips to the hardware store because Michael wanted to fix one more thing. At first, the silence echoed. Then, it became comforting. I learned something unexpected. Being alone isn't the same as being lonely. I'd actually been lonely for years. Back when I was eating dinner across from someone who never really saw me. Now I came home to an empty house. And somehow it felt fuller. Work continued to grow. Our Midwest division expanded into 2 new states. We hired dozens of new employees. I spent more time mentoring young managers than sitting behind a desk. One afternoon, after a leadership seminar, a woman in her late 20s caught up with me in the hallway. Emily. Yes. She looked nervous. I hope this isn't weird. It won't be. She smiled. I just wanted to thank you. For what? I've heard people talk about your career. I laughed. I hope they said nice things. They did. But that's not why. She hesitated. I was recently promoted. My husband keeps joking that I'm the breadwinner now. She forced a smile. I know he's kidding. But sometimes it doesn't feel like a joke. I understood immediately. She wasn't asking about promotions. She was asking for permission to stop apologizing for succeeding. I looked her in the eyes. Never shrink your accomplishments to protect someone else's ego. She stood quietly, then nodded. I needed to hear that. No. I smiled. You needed to believe it. She thanked me and walked away. I watched her disappear down the hallway. For a brief moment, I saw a younger version of myself. The version who still believed love required becoming smaller. I wished I could go back and tell her the same thing. A few weeks later, I ran into Linda again. This time it wasn't planned. We both reached for the same tomatoes at a neighborhood farmer's market. She laughed first. Looks like we still have the same taste. Igues vedo. We ended up walking through the market together, talking about ordinary things. Gardening. Recipes. The unusually warm spring weather. Eventually she stopped beside a flower stand. I spoke to Michael yesterday. I waited. He's seeing a therapist. I smiled softly. I'm glad. So am I. She looked at me. He said something that stayed with me. What was that? He told me. Linda paused for a moment. That losing you forced him to meet himself for the first time. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. I hope therapy helps him. I think it already is. She reached over and hugged me. Not because I had once been her daughter-in-law. Simply because 2 people can care about each other. Even after life changes. That evening, I planted fresh herbs in the backyard. The sun was beginning to set. A light breeze moved through the trees. The house was quiet. Peaceful. Exactly the way I liked it. As I watered the garden, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. For a second, I almost ignored it. Then I opened it. Michael. I won't bother you again after this. I kept reading. I just wanted to tell you that I finally told everyone the truth. Not because I had to anymore. Because I wanted to. I wish I'd been brave enough to do it years ago. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed a reply. Only one sentence. I truly hope you keep choosing honesty, even when no one is watching. A minute later, 3 little dots appeared. Then disappeared. No reply ever came. And somehow, that felt like the right ending for our story. Or at least, the right ending for the chapter we had written together. Several months passed. Life settled into something that felt real. Not perfect. Real. There was a difference. For the first time in years, I wasn't measuring my words before introducing myself. I wasn't wondering what version of my life someone else had already heard. When people asked what I did for a living, I simply answered. No hesitación. No explanación. No looking around to see if someone might feel uncomfortable. It was surprisingly liberating. One Friday afternoon, our company held a leadership conference at a hotel just outside downtown Chicago. More than 300 managers from across the country attended. The ballroom buzzed with conversations, presentations, and networking. As one of the keynote speakers, I spent most of the day answering questions and meeting people from offices I'd never visited. After my presentation, a young manager approached me. He couldn't have been older than 30. Ms. Carter. Please, I smiled. Emily. He nodded. I wanted to thank you. What for? Your presentation. He looked slightly nervous. When you talked about leadership, you said something that really stuck with me. I searched my memory. I said a lot of things. He laughed. You said. He pulled out his notebook. A good leader never asks someone to become smaller so they can feel bigger. I smiled. I remember. He closed the notebook. I realized I've been doing exactly that. To my team. I've been taking credit for ideas because I was afraid they'd outshine me. He looked embarrassed. I didn't even realize I was doing it. For a moment, I simply looked at him. Then I said, the hardest person to compete with is the version of yourself you're pretending to be. He stood there quietly. I think I needed to hear that. So did I. Driving home that evening, I kept thinking about our conversation. Funny how pain works. When you're living through it, it feels meaningless, pointless, like something you simply have to survive. But months later, sometimes it becomes the very thing that allows you to help someone else. Maybe that was the only reason any of it had happened. Not to punish Michael. Not to embarrass anyone. But to remind me that truth has value far beyond one relationship. A few weeks later, I received an invitation from the Chicago Arts Foundation. They were celebrating another successful fundraising season. This time, they wanted to recognize several long-term corporate partners. At the bottom of the invitation was a handwritten note. We hope you'll join us again. I smiled. The same theater. The same stage. The same place where my life had changed. For a brief second I wondered if I should decline. Then I realized something. Why should I avoid a place where I had finally stopped pretending? So I accepted. The evening of the event felt strangely familiar. The lights. The music. The excitement in the lobby. Only this time, I walked through the entrance completely alone. And I didn't feel alone at all. Several people recognized me. Some thanked our company for supporting local arts. Others remembered my brief remarks from the previous gala. One woman stopped me near the coat check. I know this might sound strange. She smiled. But last year, you inspired me. I looked surprised. I did. I was sitting a few rows behind the front section. She laughed softly. I didn't know anything about your personal life. I just remember watching the way you carried yourself. There was so much confidence. So much peace. I went home and finally asked for the promotion I'd been avoiding. She grinned. I got it. I couldn't help smiling. Congratulations. Thank you. She hesitated. You probably don't remember giving that speech. I barely remember it myself. It wasn't really the speech. She shook her head. It was the way you stood there. Like you weren't asking permission to exist. Those words stayed with me long after she walked away. Because once upon a time, I had spent years asking for exactly that. About 6 months later, I received an unexpected email. The subject line simply read, "Thank you." There was no company logo. No signatura y recognisa. I opened it anyway. Y Emily. You don't know me. We never met. But I was sitting in the audience the night you walked on stage at the Chicago Theater. I frowned. I kept reading. I wasn't one of the VIP guests. My company bought a table farther back. I remember watching everyone applaud while you thanked the organizers. It wasn't until later that evening that someone explained what had actually happened. Normally, I don't get involved in strangers' lives. But your story stayed with me. Because for 12 years, I've been pretending to be someone smaller than I really am. I stopped reading for a second, then continued. I'm a physician. My husband has always introduced me as working part-time at a clinic, because he felt uncomfortable telling people I own the practice. I kept allowing it because I thought protecting his pride was part of being a supportive wife. Last month, I finally corrected someone. It wasn't dramatic. I simply told the truth. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. So thank you. Not for embarrassing anyone. For reminding me that honesty isn't cruelty. Sometimes, it's self-respect. There was no last name. Just a grateful stranger. I closed my laptop and sat quietly for a while. Funny how life works. You think your story belongs only to you. Then one day you discover someone else has been carrying the same weight. They simply carried it in a different house, with different names. That evening, I took a walk along the Chicago River. The city looked exactly the way it had on the night of Michael's company dinner. The same bridges. The same lights reflecting on the water. The same skyline. Only one thing had changed. Me. A year earlier, I had stood near this river wondering why complete strangers believed I had no career. Now, it didn't matter what strangers believed. Because I finally knew that I didn't need anyone else's permission to be proud of the life I'd built. Sometimes people still ask whether I regret walking onto that stage. My answer is always the same. I don't regret stepping into the spotlight. I regret spending so many years standing in someone else's shadow. Those are two very different things. If I could speak to the woman I was 7 years earlier, the one who smiled politely while people erased her accomplishments, I wouldn't tell her to leave immediately. I wouldn't tell her to fight harder. I wouldn't even tell her that her marriage was going to end. I'd tell her something much simpler. Never let anyone edit your life story without your permission. Because that's how it starts. Not with shouting. Not with betrayal. But with tiny corrections. Tiny omissions. Tiny lies that seem harmless. Until one day, you realize the person everyone knows isn't you at all. Michael and I haven't spoken in months. I genuinely hope he's doing well. Not because we're getting back together. We're not. But because I believe people can grow. I believe they can confront uncomfortable truths. I believe they can become better than they once were. Sometimes, growth simply comes too late to save the relationship that taught the lesson. And that's one of the hardest truths adulthood has to offer. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this. Real love doesn't require one person to become smaller, so the other can feel taller. It celebrates success. It speaks the truth with pride. It introduces you exactly as you are, even when your accomplishments outshine its own. Because the right person doesn't fear your light. They stand beside it. And if they can't, then maybe they were never standing beside you in the first place. Thank you for listening to my story. Now I'd like to ask you something. If you had been in my position, would you have walked onto that stage? Or would you have stayed silent? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs the reminder that the truth is never something to be ashamed of. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you'll ever do is simply introduce yourself.